He's going to be a labor negotiator.
No, there's my name.
Is this on the teacher's thing? My name was suggested.
Oh, well, yeah, like I said,
Sheffield should have brought the cups.
That coffee was not
And I really
it
hope
was
they
left over from a meeting this afternoon, and I don't know anything about it.
Much better for the meeting if we had no cups.
I
Have you ever
understand.
done that before?
Twice.
That was like working around.
I did it twice in
Just having a few cups available creates everybody else's desire to have a
So, and I don't have time.
I thought maybe that without coffee it would expedite the meeting.
Yeah, they called me today and I said,
Who called?
NEA, Alaska.
Well, see, I got called from the other side.
I doubled up on my clothes tonight because they got me boys.
So I don't know how long.
Let's call the meeting to order. They can hear us back there.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to test something and move that no inning be started after 10 o'clock tonight.
No meeting.
No inning be started after 10. No, that we try to, just as that we shoot for adjournment at 10 o'clock on the theory that work fills the time available. If we're critical.
And if we don't make it, we
Then we
shoot the chairman.
Was that the charter
I think
production
you'll-
chairman or
Yeah, charter production chair.
we need a clarification there.
I'll second them.
That's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Those opposed? Nobody having been heard from? Now,
You got it, Gary. You got it.
we have a roll call. Oh, we have a quorum. There are no minutes available.
But there will be minutes.
No appearance requests made. Is there any unfinished business?
Oh, wow.
We could discuss that, we never.
How about new business? Is there a go to reports of the Charter Production Committee?
Now, here we are again. Okay, Rick has come up with some wording on the service areas. Did you keep a copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Frank, you have a copy. Abby, do you have a copy?
Really
Okay,
pains me that
Bill?
Mary's not here because this is all a gift to Mary in a way.
Where is Mary tonight? Should I? She will be here, I'll bet.
Don't worry about it.
She's going to be quiet.
Well, we have to do tonight. Stop on our list, well, get over there.
Okay. I would really like to ask the attorney, since he was the one who put down on paper the extra words from last night,
You missed some good discussion.
to answer any questions that the commission might have, assuming you all can read.
I might even, if you want, Ms.
Not necessarily, so.
There are obviously one or two things in here that were not necessarily covered in the discussion, and I put them in as what I think is good, but obviously for review and evaluation by the commission. And if you like, I'll explain my rationale.
When are we starting on?
Okay.
A question was raised before you begin, Mr. Chairman, if I might. Just as a matter of procedure, does the commission feel that since Mary was the one who really was most interested in this extra wording, that we might wait till Mary appears, or would you prefer going on as is? Do you feel we might have to go over this again once
Maybe
Mary
as
comes?
addition would be the thing to look at.
Okay.
I would like to go through it. If Mary shows it, we have to go through it again, all right.
Well,
I don't know, whatever you folks want,
can I ask for a sense of the other commissioners on this?
certainly.
I think, for practical purposes, since we have a major issue, that we would be best to consider education.
other commissioner? Okay, why don't we, for the sake of harmony, consider education? And I would ask Rick if there are any substantive changes that you would like to speak to.
Yeah, sure. Just a few, I would say. And first, my first concern, of course, is that this reflects what the committee decided to omit from the education. There were several portions of the education section as it appeared in 71, which were to be transferred into other sections, forfeitures and that sort of thing, and a general candidacy section, budget into a general budget and finance section, things of that sort. So what's left is what I believe the committee, or the commission, decided to leave into education by way of general subject matter. Any dissent on that point?
You had the summary of it last night.
Yeah.
See it. Is that the, have you had an opportunity to look it over and see?
Mr. Chairman, just for my edification, on 701, you basically have put in the alternative for further input. Is that correct? The one of 7 at large, and then is the other as a possibility? You're not making that decision now? I'm talking regarding the election of the school board in 701.
I wasn't sure what decision, if any, had been made on that point.
Has a decision?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe a decision was made. I think we thought we would try to utilize the phone back poll in connection with our survey to get additional information. The reason the designated seat is omitted in this new thing is, I think, a stylistic one, in that after, if you'll notice on this other one, after that particular section,
Oh, wait a minute. This is the new one.
yeah, things omitted were, I mean, this was put in to show what was omitted
Oh, I see. Okay.
here, and just stylistically, I don't think Rick has continued to put in the omitted parts.
That's right. It got so completely
cumbersome.
chopped up that I
Yeah.
just felt it was...
All right, well,
So
is
we-
there any action that we need to take on that? Are we, by seeing this, then approving of 701 as it's...
We have not taken any formal action on any of the education section, but we could do so tonight.
I
The commission wished.
We did discuss the designated seat issue and other ways of doing it, I think, last night.
Fine, there was no determination made, though. That's what...
The education article was never acted on because, for one thing, our schedule indicated we would reach it tonight.
Okay.
So,
We thought perhaps great crowds of people interested in education would appear on our doorstep tonight.
They're better, they're clean. That's what we
Rick, do you have things you'd like to...
Okay, yes. Sherry, what did I do? I'm handicapped. Carlos, can I borrow the thing that I had last night? This is really...
You can have mine.
Okay. The first part, section 701, is as is, except I did not put in the reference to designated seats. We understand that that decision hasn't been made.
Okay.
Okay. The changes in 702 do conform to what the subcommittee thought were mostly style changes. Instead of each member of the other set of candidate for, I don't believe there are substantive changes in 702.
No, there's definitely not.
Okay. Vacancy and all that, vacancy forfeiture prohibition was going to be included in a general provision on those
No
topics.
problem with that.
Likewise, public meetings. Okay, now on powers of the school board, I think you can see what happened there. We wanted to get away from reference to state law and to municipal law, and yet, as I understand, we wanted to enumerate the same things that were enumerated in 71. Now, when you enumerate, as illustrative, in a sense, but not as strict limitations on the school board's power. And I felt that in writing a provision in that form, if you were setting out a list of examples of power, which is illustrative of a larger body of power, you have to at least make reference to the larger body of power that you're talking about. And it seemed to me that the word by law, which would of course be defined back in the other section, do that trick without alarming people who are alarmed by references to municipal law, say. The without limitation language is the same as...
Is it a school board have?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to ask about this phrase without limitation, and suggest that unless there's a reason for it as a term of art, that it might be better to say including but not limited to, because the term without limitation will suggest to some people that
Powers are unlimited.
that they're just arbitrary and
I agree with that. Technically, without limitation means the same thing as...
I think
but
it
not
did
limited
mean
to,
the
but
same.
yeah, I agree.
Okay, so in the without limitation, say that again, Joe.
including but not limited to.
The power to,
Uh,
I would agree, Joe, that's a
Okay. Formulate, and I changed the form of the enumeration a little bit to make it verbal rather than nominative, but formulate policy for the operation of the schools. Now on number 2, I did make a couple of changes, and I'll explain. I didn't think it was necessary to talk about the manner provided by law, or to refer to collective bargaining agreements, since those things will be applicable in any event. The really substantive change I made, and this does relate to my dealings with the state-operated school system and this kind of thing, the language, the word for cause, which says the powers of the school board include appointment of personnel, including superintendent, and their suspension or removal for cause, is a substantive thing in education circles. As some of you are familiar with, there's a distinction between tenured and non-tenured teachers. Tenured teachers can only be dismissed for cause, strictly enumerated causes, immorality, incompetence, and substantial non-compliance with the law. Non-tenured teachers do not, can be dismissed for reasons other than those stated causes. And I believe it's possible that if the for cause phrase is left in here, it can be construed to wipe out the distinction between tenured and non-tenured teachers in that respect, and require that all terminations of personnel be, quote, for cause. That is a term of art in education law.
Well, this appears to me to be a simpler way of stating it and perhaps consistent with our broader...
When you provide for what you've done it.
Yeah, I think this way I've written it gives the school board all the power that they have under the present law to appoint and discharge employees. It doesn't add this additional complication that I think might come up in the other language. And as to paragraph 3, I just shortened it. I intended the meaning to be the
it's
same.
amazing.
Good.
Good work. Really good. Well, hatchet man.
Down to one page yet.
You just have to clean it up, but I don't know.
Print it on the back of grocery sacks.
Really, and that's the only substantive change, I
And
believe.
just a rewording.
The joint conferences business, I tried to remember what Bill had said about the wording as to what they should discuss, and the best that came to mind was...
Well, there was a reference to the comprehensive plan.
Financial planning, capital needs, and other matters of which are concerned. I wasn't really what it was. Coordinate financial planning, capital improvement needs. And then we done something about the word comprehensive plan, Joe. What was it?
Well, they were going to discuss the comprehensive, I just think the words "the comprehensive plan," which is otherwise referenced in the charter, would be...
Capital improvement needs is narrower and really you get into comprehensive planning. You can consider a capital improvement program, what my way of thinking, as a part of that.
How about capital improvement needs of the comprehensive plan? Or,
But you want to
that's
talk
not-
about more aspects of the
Yeah.
comprehensive
Yeah,
plan.
you do, site location.
You have to have that in there, Joe. Doesn't
Yes, I think so. I think
Isn't-
I'm in love with that.
Isn't,
I think that with just
please, I'm sorry.
we had a long discussion about this matter of the assembly and school board meeting. The old charter talked of meeting twice a year to discuss matters of mutual interest. I think it was the sense of most of us that we should give them a more precise agenda than that. And since we were going to have reference to a comprehensive plan, this was one of the items that we thought,
How would you possibly see this then, Joe?
well,
Just add comprehensive plan and all these other things?
yes, except for the point you raised that the capital,
I would say capital improvement needs and comprehensive plan, period. I leave out the other matters of which you're concerned. If it's just,
I know.
that's just extra words that figured out necessary.
Could be,
They're going to talk about it anyway.
whatever you think.
Like we said last night about the color issue in line.
well, what about if you said to discuss and coordinate
Limited.
the comprehensive plan, including financial and capital needs planning or something like that?
What if they want to discuss personnel matters, for instance? I mean, do you want to preclude that?
No,
under
no, no.
commissions?
Oh, no, well,
Mr. Chairman, doesn't capital improvement needs come under the heading of financial planning? Isn't that, I mean, aren't the two terms quite similar?
Well, one is budget, an operational budget for, by the year, and then the capital improvement program would be a 5 and 6 year ongoing program all the time, updated every year. And they really are two distinct things, except I don't know if I disagree with that. They are two distinct things in my mind, but I'm not sure that they are necessarily something that has to be put. I don't argue with the point.
I
think myself, I think the financial planning would cover both if
Yeah,
really, because you got a plan for capital improvements.
How about financial and comprehensive planning needs? Or do you want to speak directly to that comprehensive plan?
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we say to discuss and coordinate financial planning, capital improvement needs, the comprehensive plan, and other matters of mutual concern.
yes, I agree. I second.
That was a motion.
Yes.
I move.
Do that again?
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Would you like me to repeat my motion for Mr. Sheffield? Okay, after capital, you put in improvement needs. Okay, so it reads capital improvement needs, the comprehensive plan, and other matters of mutual concern.
Mr. Chairman, Sherry or whoever would like to respond. We've outlined the development of a comprehensive plan, and that's been accepted as one of the areas. Are we, by introducing this, giving any real responsibility to the school board in the comprehensive plan? Well, I mean, what are we interjecting here?
What we're interjecting is that there was a feeling by some that the school board has never related to the comprehensive plan. It was operated as a separate government, subject only to an overall budget limitation, and that communication between the two bodies has been very poor. This was to indicate that the comprehensive plan includes schools, and that the school board and the assembly should relate to it.
I think what I'm trying to say, we aren't, by this amendment, giving them any specific, direction as to the overall comprehensive plan, just really as
Oh, you mean just...
it relates to the
Oh, yes.
school thing. I mean, there's no problem that we're making a broader.
We're not broadening their powers. You know, the powers of the school board are
Yeah.
otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, the powers are pretty well set out. One thing, if I could just say a little background, one of the things I think we're concerned with is that the school board maybe should have a better rapport with whatever the assembly is going to be, whatever the council is going to be made up of, and a little more research should go in, or a little more planning should go into budgeting and capital improvement programs,
Yeah, I think.
and it's just I think my idea of part of it was that they ought to be doing more and following some plan. Of course, I had my way about it.
I have kind of a parliamentary question here. Since we never made a motion to adopt the section in the first place, is my motion to amend something that hasn't been moved in order?
Why not by mutual consent?
By mutual consent.
Well, you know,
Why don't we go up with a question?
Then the parliamentarian says it's...
Well, no, it's really, I think we ought to just agree that we'll add as not have a Morrison, just like we agreed with Rick. We're just really going through
Does that matter to you?
this kind of work session, aren't we? Or unless you want to
Since
make
I
it
moved
formal.
We have a majority, we have
Okay,
a
then,
quorum here, and if we pass by unanimous vote, it will be functional.
all right, then,
for the
Mr. Chairman, then we should have the whole matter, or something before it, so that we have something to amend, and the same with Rick's, Morrison.
Just a point of order, because this may come up, I don't think we need a unanimous vote. The majority of the quorum could act.
We have a limitation as to the number, and I thought that was set in our rules. 6, isn't it? Yes, 6.
And we do need unanimity?
Majority of the membership of the commission shall constitute a quorum. A majority vote of the membership of the commission shall be required for all official action.
I stand
We
corrected.
need unanimity.
Is a motion then before the body?
That's ruled out of order. We would then need a motion for whatever you wish to consider in total.
I move for the approval of Article 6 as presented by the attorney.
Article 7, actually, is incorrect.
It says 6 on here, I can see.
Article 7 is correct.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve Article 7 as presented.
I was. I just got back.
Jay,
Right.
we have before us the Article 7 on education. We've gone through it. And
We've done this before, I remember.
Sharon?
And it is as modified last night with a couple of small modifications today.
Chairman, as I recall last time, we didn't take any action on the education section due to the fact that we had so few charter commission members. This evening we have fewer. Is that correct?
No.
It wasn't on our agenda last night.
We thought maybe we'd have hordes of people coming to talk about education tonight.
Now,
Oh, well, maybe they don't understand.
I'll ask a question of a parliamentarian as to the modifications we've made and discussed.
I'm about to take care of that. I would,
I need to know if there is a second for this adjustment.
Mine.
now, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we amend, can I amend 2 sections in my motion? That we amend section 703 to strike the words without limitation and substitute but not limited to.
Second.
Been moved and, would you include changing the word have to have?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And to change the word have to has.
It's been moved and seconded to amend article, or section 703, first sentence, to the school board has the powers provided by law, including but not limited to the power to. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So,
Mr. Chairman,
that's, yeah.
move to amend by addition in 704 to add after capital the word improvement and after needs the comprehensive plan.
Second?
Moved and seconded to add section 704 after capital, word improvement, and after needs, comma, and the comprehensive plan and. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Now we'll take up the main motion, which was to,
Chairman, I would like to ask the members of the commission whether we feel that we want to officially adopt Section 701 at this point. Whether we wish to adopt it subject to change at a later date, or whether we wish to leave that.
Mr. Josephson.
All our actions are subject to change at a later
Well,
date.
obviously they are, I know.
But
I'm just
you
reiterating.
don't think I contributed very much. Well, let me try again.
What I was trying in my feeble way to say was last night someone suggested that maybe we ought not to take official action on 701.
I think that's
What was the comment?
She said she thought that someone was Joe.
Well,
But he's
Mr. Chair,
changed his mind, so we can...
I've been turned around. No, I think that we should act on it like the other sections, and if we get public hearing input that suggests something else, then we can deal with that.
I agree. I think
Is there further discussion?
Question on the...
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those
Of what?
opposed?
The whole
The
section?
whole article.
701.
Yes.
No, the whole article.
Adoption of the whole section.
All
Oh,
of
okay.
those.
Of the whole article.
The whole article.
The whole article.
Do you want to
Mr. Chairman,
discuss it?
since Lisa was apparently not aware you were calling for the question on the whole and indicate some objection, I wonder if it would be appropriate that she give us those comments.
I was voting against all of Article 7.
No, but
You want to know what?
well, I've been interested. Maybe some modifications are needed.
I just don't think that there's much here. And that I'm still wondering why we need the education article and
Lisa, do you think it needs to be stronger, weaker, non-existent?
if it's going to be anything, it should be stronger. How it should be stronger, I'm not sure yet.
Could we have the attorney comment, Mr. Chairman, briefly, if we were to leave it blank, where would we be?
We would not have, we would be in a situation where the new assembly could provide by ordinance exactly how these questions would be handled, except as constrained by present state law, particularly with respect to the type of election and such things where there may be leeway.
Lisa?
Mr. Attorney, doesn't it state in state law that there shall be 7 persons if they're elected at large, and that these are their qualifications, and I don't know about the powers section, if it makes reference to that, and then,
You know,
we have made the reference to this, that the assembly and this school board meet.
Sure, you're right. I'm not sure if state law precludes designated seats. You feel it does, and I assume it didn't.
Sherry?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe the state law says at large. It just says 7 members, does it
So
not?
I understand.
And so therefore, if we had no education article, we would have to at least deal with education in the transition section or somewhere in the charter in order to be able to have a constituted body at the time unification took place, wouldn't we?
Seems like it.
I mean, wouldn't there be a question about that?
I think it has to be dealt with because of the fact that there are thousands of people who, theoretically at least, will look to that first. And I think it's a good article. We can argue about the at-large factor, but we do understand, we'll see what people say. I think we put the right kind of floor under the school board. We've avoided the problem that was raised last night that in an assembly school board fight, we didn't want to let ordinances be used as
Addicted too. I think that's very good.
And I think that we've strengthened this matter of the duty for communication between the assembly and the school board in a very constructive way.
And further, Mr. Chairman, I might add that people are annoyed if they can't see set out in a document like the charter at least a basic outlining of what state law tells them. And most people don't have easy access to Title 14 to run back to and check on the school.
Most people wouldn't even know where to look
So I
physically, where to find it.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, excuse me.
I was just going to say, I believe the commission proceeded on similar principles in connection with the planning article, for instance, when we concluded that not absolutely necessary, but people are concerned about planning. Their mention is warranted.
Sherry?
I would now, I guess, call for the question.
Good. Question has been recalled. All those in favor? Those opposed? Lisa? 1 opposed, 6 in favor.
Back to citizenship.
Here we are again, guys.
Is that all we had on the agenda? Mr. Chairman, is that the only other item?
Now, we have the assembly on the agenda for tonight. We probably don't have anything written up on
I
yet.
really don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. But I would think that we could probably go through pretty easily on the basis of our document.
What is finance?
Article 2. Finance, we have a workshop on this Saturday,
That's what I'm saying.
and then we consider it next Wednesday.
I'm winging my way to Seattle.
When are you meeting?
When Saturday?
Saturday, 9 to 12. Here. We have a work session.
Got to go.
Norma Beck and a whole bunch of other people.
Full commission or
Right, Chairman. Sherry, I was going to ask, on the assembly article, if you want to act on it tonight, fine. If not, I could probably have it written up tomorrow, by tomorrow afternoon.
I would suggest that we might go over it and see how, and at least discuss it. And perhaps act on it tomorrow if we find too many changes, or act on it tonight if we can do it clearly.
Where are you at, Sharon?
Article 2 of the 71 Charter, which is the assembly. Now, we did not touch sections 201 and 202. Those are left for next week because we hope to have the results of the survey back in order to speak to the question of the composition. So we began with section 203, compensation, and we liked the sentence that was there, but we would propose adding another sentence, which would read, and I'll read it quickly and then I'll read it slowly again for you to take down. No ordinance increasing the annual salary shall become effective until the assembly members elected at the next regular election take office. This is a provision that we took out of the Model City Charter, and the reason for this is so that assembly members can increase their own salary. It puts it off until the next regular election. The idea being that there was some hue and cry when various people raised their salaries, raised their own salaries.
How does that work in the first assembly?
How did it work?
No, how would it work in the first assembly?
When they have no salary.
First assembly?
They could increase their salary,
Well, they,
now, that would take effect after the next regular election in October.
Well, I mean, in the new government,
well, I would see that not as increasing, I would see that as establishing in the first place.
One possible approach to that might be in the transition sections to set the initial salary of assemblymen. Then
Or
when the
to say that the provision in section 203 does not apply to the first setting of the salary.
Did Andy Ward's case go to court? That would be a typical example of the Department of Administration. He voted on his salary in the legislature, and then he moved on in
Well,
before time.
he has not been approved yet
nothing
because of that
confirmed yet.
issue.
It may go to court.
I wonder, would that be agreeable to, make, say, a list of things that go in transitional and possibly consider that there? Who's doing that? Are you?
Presumably we'll have minutes which might reflect that that's something that belongs in transition. Okay. Do you want me to read this slowly so that you can take it down?
Yeah, well, I don't know. We can follow that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, excuse me, because I may have been wool gathering. Is this the first change that you discussed?
Yes, but we did not consider 201 and 202.
Okay, all right.
I'm trying to get myself onto the right page of my notes. Vacancies and forfeiture of office. This was going to be moved to a separate section.
And including prohibitions, 204 and 207 prohibitions. We felt that we could write a general title that would cover all elected offices, in other words, the school board and the assembly. Rather, this would allow us then to get away from by reference.
Yeah, and
Is it A, B, C?
A, B, and C, and
Right.
207.
for some reason I'm missing my notes on this section. Do you have, Rick, do you have the notes or Alice, do you have the notes?
Not well enough, because
I have something, based on our subcommittee meeting.
Okay. So I understood that we were going to, in A, change the wording to say elective offices shall become vacant upon the death, resignation, or so forth. And then an elected official shall forfeit his office if he, and then we thought that 1, 2, and 3 were fine. And 4, as I understood it, we were not going to have the 3 consecutive regular meetings of the assembly spelled out.
We were going to say a number determined by ordinance or something.
The assembly could set
Could set
by
the procedure by
ordinance.
ordinance.
Right.
That would not apply to the mayor, I assume, and to the school board people? Attendance?
It was our intent that this section would apply.
The section would, but you have a problem
Oh, yeah,
in
the
number 4.
meetings and stuff. We don't,
Yeah.
Of the elected body, assembly of the elected body, wouldn't that?
We would have to say, in the case of the assembly and the school
Yeah.
board,
Okay, let's
and
not-
not include the mayor, because he doesn't have to attend.
Well, you think it's appropriate, though, that by ordinance they would set it for the school board as well as the assembly. It's just the mayor you want out, Joe, is that it?
You mean by charter, set it for the school board and the assembly?
No, we say that the assembly can set by ordinance. That was our,
Oh,
the,
well,
Say
The thing that occurred to me is at some future time, say 10 years from now, they may have 3 regular meetings a week. And at that point, if the assembly were piqued at a member who had to be out of town, they could just refuse to excuse him and cause him to have to forfeit his office.
Mr. Chairman, Sherry, I think the issue that Joe is considering is the one of the assembly being able to set by ordinance the provisions for the assembly as well as the school board. And is that desirable? I wonder if presently the school board has any method of causing forfeiture of office, and if so, how they derive that.
I don't think there is. I don't believe so. I know of several resignations because they left the area, but we've had legislators that were in Juneau, Josh Wright, for instance, that came back fairly regular, but still missed alternate meetings for quite a while.
well, I think it should be stated that it should be reference to this because people may look for it and again, if they don't see it in the charter, think that we're allowing assemblymen or assemblywomen to serve without limitation as to absences. I guess I would come down in favor, if we can do it, of letting the board decide what the rule should be for their own members. I mean, typically a body decides the qualifications of its own members and not to have the assembly.
Joe, could you say this, that the elected body shall determine by ordinance or resolution
Yeah, I think you
number,
could,
the reasons for forfeiture of office by absentee or the number of absences.
an elected official shall forfeit his office if he, in the case of a member of an elected body, fails to meet the attendance standards set by that body as a condition of membership. So that's where.
Thou art worthy.
Shall not be unreasonably.
Okay, well,
You
You
understand?
got the idea, though.
I think we'd have a lot less flack if the school board, which is an elected body, set its own rules, as long as we require that they
If you
set rules.
If you
I think
said
that's
so,
important.
the elected body determines its own.
That doesn't bother me.
The assembly and school board shall by ordinance or resolution establish procedures relating to attendance.
Other conditions?
As a qualification of, or as, that's the thing. You can have proceeding. That's why you indicated that I was using too many words, because I wanted to state that you have to make it clear that these are, I think that these are grounds for removal from office.
You've got to make the ordinance would have the effect of law. Would a resolution have the effect?
Yeah, that's what we discussed.
How about leaving the wording that's there now, but instead of saying 3 consecutive regular meetings, fails to attend a number of regular meetings of the assembly or school board, without being excused by formal action of the body, such number to be set by ordinance or resolution.
This is where you do it.
I know.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate it.
Sorry. I spoke too soon.
Mr. Chairman, Rick, can we, can by resolution, the school board, set reasons for forfeiture of, and the number of meetings, and that, failure to attend meetings would cause their forfeiture of office? Can you do that by resolution?
If you'll toss me that little white book, I can probably give you an idea in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Warm.
Well, why don't, might I suggest that, wait a minute. Oh my
You
God.
got it.
Will you promise to read it more slowly?
I got all of that last.
Is he bribable? To digress a moment, has anyone played Lie, Cheat, and Steal?
Wait, what?
Lie, Cheat, and Steal. It's a game of political power that I find quite fascinating. While Joe is
All right, let me try. Oh, this is too wordy. I'm going to get it all over again. Huh?
2 minutes on the tape.
Okay. Shall forfeit at his office if an assemblyman or school board member fails to meet attendance requirements set by the assembly or board as the case may be.
fails to meet
Fail.
attendance.
Requirements set by the assembly or board as the case may be.
Read it again.
Shall forfeit his office if if an assemblyman or school board member fails to meet attendance requirements set by the assembly or school board as the case may be.
Could you just substitute elected official or not? The mayor would set his own attendance requirements.
That's good.
But we still haven't answered, though, whether the question of
legal.
the legal. Maybe we
The
simply,
main section here on school boards is silent on the point. I'll look a little further. If they don't have the power now to do it, I believe the charter could confer upon them the power to do it.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we just move ahead and incorporate similar wording to that, and then check
But I
out
think
the
your
legal.
wording's pretty good.
Thank you. I'll give this to the secretary and the attorney. You have it?
You could have it, Ellie.
I think so.
Okay, now, Rick, do you have notes on the section C about rewordings or Arliss?
Well,
We discussed what a couple of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then when we got down to vacancies,
We have to clean up.
we were to clean that up, the wording from there on vacancies.
C is really long.
I believe we left the first sentence as it was.
Except for shading the second word, except that it elected.
Right. And then the vacancies though, had some real problems with the wording there. And it asked Rick to reword that.
Yeah. I would, Carlos, in the absence of my having reworded it, the best thing might be for the commission just to decide what it wants in here and what general ideas it wants stated, and then we have a shot at it.
I remember now
Unless you-
what I saw at home. Now they're in the yellow, my yellow charter. The only question is to find. Where's the yellow charter? I think it's in there. No, it's not in there. It's not in the yellow charter. Okay. Sorry.
I can't give you any help on this.
Okay, we talked about the 45 days versus 60 days.
And looking at it, why couldn't we just say, no vacancy shall be filled by the council after that is closer than 60 days, I'm going to kind of follow the wording, or closer than 45 days to the next general election, shall be left vacant for that period. Any vacancy prior to that time shall be filled by appointment for the remaining term. To make it clear that after 45 days before the election to the election time, there would be no, if a vacancy were declared, it would not be filled. Prior to that, you'd fill it by appointment, even if it were 46 days. You get a little politics in there, but you will any division point.
The only problem with that is that I think we have to mandate that they do it within a certain number of days, because if it's like 120 days before the election, they really should have to do it within 30 days.
Must be filled within 30 days if, except at the last.
Well, what you're really saying is you want wording that says what this does, but the shorter. I do think, though, there's an important thing we have to, and I don't think we talked about that. They've called here, the assemblyman elected shall fill the balance of the term of office of the person whose seat has become vacant. I feel that he should serve only until the next regular election, and then he would run for an unexpired term. If I'm reading this correctly, it says, let's say that somebody resigned a month after he's elected to a 3-year term. I don't think you should fill
Shouldn't have it filled
almost
by
3
the body
years
for
with
3
an
years.
appointed one. And that,
Or
No.
might drop dead.
am I misreading?
No,
it?
you're misreading it. You're misreading it, Arliss. It says vacancies shall be filled at the next general election, occurring not more than 45 days after the vacancy is determined. The assemblyman elected, not appointed, shall fill the balance of the term of office of the person whose seat has become vacant.
Okay, that's okay then, fine. I wondered why I hadn't seen that before, because it wasn't there.
Do you see anything really wrong with it, or are you just trying to shorten it?
Trying to
Yeah, we were
shorten
just trying
It's a little awkward to
to...
read.
It's awkward.
Yeah.
Instruction is
Well, yeah.
construction is all.
Which, so I think what we had said to Rick was see if you could go back and clean up the words a little bit. And so maybe we say to Rick again, would you clean up the
I've got
words?
a little backlog of cleanup to do here, you know, and I'm running out of real.
You're running out of time, huh? Okay, I think that we basically approved section 205 on assembly meetings and procedures, except that we wanted to eliminate the references and incorporate, for instance, down in D, there's reference to as provided in section 204C. Well, 204C is not going to be immediately above because it'll be in a whole new area. And so we wanted the wording, the substantial wording incorporated there rather than just a reference. And I think in C above that, we wanted the word president to be chairman. We felt that president was put in this charter because it was so close after when John Asplin was called chairman of the borough that it might have been confusing to call the head of the new assembly the chairman.
President sounds a bit much, although it has a ring to it.
Well, since Watergate, it now has a negative connotation.
Madam President.
That's what John Kennedy said about the song Head of the Chief. He liked the ring of it, you know.
Why don't... Would you like to look this section over now and see if you come up with any quarrels? Because it would be nice if tomorrow we could act on this expeditious question.
And we did feel that 205 pretty much as is, with the exception of changing president to chairman in C, and also incorporating in 1, so in item D there, so that we could get rid of the referencing again.
Chairman up in A again. Chairman
Joe?
Yes.
Chairman.
A. Chairman.
I answered, see.
What
We have you
said
well
president?
trained, Frank. Hi, Frank.
Rick?
Yes. Sherry, you know, this presents a real drafting challenge, and I personally feel like it ought to be possible to shorten it a lot and make it much more aesthetically pleasing than it now is. However, I personally can't do that between now and noon tomorrow. Therefore, if the commission be willing to decide on the substance of what it wants done, postpone final action on the wording until early next week, say, I would guarantee an effort toward beauty. You know?
I would feel that in our last week before we send the final draft out, that we might be able to pass on stylistic changes rather than substantive changes like that. But Rick, next week's not going to be any easier than this week was.
No, because but as
You just physically cannot.
by Monday, I could have put all this out in writing and juggle the sentences and stuff. So it's
Oh, okay, sure.
that's all I'm saying. Whereas I can't do it by tomorrow.
That's fine.
What about, I just raise it because it's a constant thorn, this matter of the executive session. Did you give that much consideration?
We did discuss it, and we felt that executive sessions were necessary, and that the provisions given in here for announcing what the session was going to be about and not taking any final action in the assembly, and the fact that it has to be limited to personnel matters or what litigation is that? the other
Yeah,
thing.
this is lifted straight from Title 44, I
Yeah,
believe.
we felt should be straight from the state.
It seemed pretty straightforward and above board.
Does it bother you to have executive sessions as set forth by the state?
It may be an aesthetic matter. I hate that language about the
Finance.
immediate public knowledge of which would adversely affect the finances of the municipality. That's like
It can be shortened.
like national security.
Well, it's pretty difficult to find something that affects the finances seriously. If you cover that with the other two, I think that could be left out from my standpoint.
Of course, it does allow in the state.
Well, if the attorney feels that he could change the style somewhat of this, that would be-
Potential litigation almost will cover that matter of financial information, like, you know, the dock falls down and you want to talk about that.
And Bowling's going to sue you.
Right.
What are you going to do about it?
How about the award of major contracts, for instance, if you're going to discuss? No,
Yeah. You can do that in executive session. I hope.
Well, yeah.
no, I don't mean, well, okay, obviously you don't do it in executive session, I mean the proposal to enter into a project which will involve large contracts.
Discussion
In a certain place.
hiring a person. There's a good suggestion here that maybe this has to do with with letting it be known that you're interested in making an acquisition of land, which
That's the kind of thing.
What does say no
I
final
think you-
action? Shall we take no?
But you still want general enough wording to handle any multiplicity of things. Yeah,
If you could discuss locating a major public works project in a particular place, you would, doing that would cost like
You know, as a matter of fact, that's not so funny because I represent the village of Eak, which is one of the north appropriations, and they selected land 17 miles from Cordova, which they knew the city council wanted as a garbage dump. And now they've asked to negotiate with the city to lease the land to the city. And there's a lot of hard feeling about it.
bitterness.
Mr. Chairman, Sherry, maybe that's one that Rick can take a look at.
Okay, I would suggest that this whole section is
Right.
maybe something that, Rick, wherever you can clean it up, please feel free. Our subcommittee
Jane
suggested...
with us? Too many meetings today.
Section 206 and investigations, we felt could be omitted, both subsection A and B. We felt that it was really not necessary to state this in the charter.
We basically have that power anyway.
The
Where
power-
it's implied.
it's implied in the sentence, all legislative powers not prohibited.
Does that include the subpoena power?
That is a good question. Normally, a legislature does have a subpoena power, doesn't it?
They have it right now, don't they?
Could you check
The
on
the
that?
wording in the Constitution is all legislative powers not prohibited.
Well, but I mean,
And certainly, well, I'm just thinking about it. The Alaska legislature, for instance, has subpoena power, I assume.
sure, I think they do. Oh, they do have. Yeah. But of course, it's given by statute, and I mean, your thesis is that that a home rule legislative body would have equivalent
Yeah,
power.
that's my thesis, and I'm 65% sure I'm right.
I thought you were going to say you were right 65%.
Shabby.
Pretty good for a lawyer.
Yeah, that's planning
if-
upper limits.
If he finds out that we can delete that, is there any objection to so deleting it?
If we have the power in already.
Can we address some of these things that we have little questions, nagging questions in the back of our mind about with some all-inclusive statement, like we were talking about exclusivity of what we were saying, but not limited to,
And what it means when we say bylaw.
and what it means.
We could maybe have one sentence in the charter that says there shall be no niggling doubts when it comes to this charter.
You know, it might be good, though, at the end, I don't know what the group thinks, but to have a kind of a staff report, which would be a statement of the legislative history and then, you know, why we omitted certain things or where,
Like a pre-conference committee report or something.
yeah.
Not as part of the charter.
No, not as part of the charter, but just as
Really what we meant, even if we didn't say it straight away.
well, I think it would help courts and
As an
also
after
voters.
As an after.
But this could be the 20 pages that we didn't write.
Everybody gets it out.
Okay, moving right along. Prohibitions, which was going to be moved up into the section, into a separate section with vacancies and forfeitures. We changed to say, except where authorized by law, no elective official. The reason we added that phrase, except where authorized by law, was that the model city charter recommended that phrase so that in specialized instances where regional planning groups might benefit from having members of elected bodies as part of their membership, that law could provide that would be an exception.
Where a councilman would belong to
To a-
the league of council.
Or council of governments or something.
Some such thing. In the future, there might be a call for that. And that was just strictly from the model city charter. We proposed to eliminate municipal office, feeling that public office also includes municipal office.
But we did raise the question, is that all inclusive? And I don't know if that was...
Well, elected public office is not the same as a municipal office.
What's a municipal office?
Does elected modify municipal?
You're right. We just looked at the term public office and not at the qualifier. So,
How about municipal employment? If you take municipal employment and elected public office together, is there anything left for municipal office?
You're either elected or you're
okay, elected public office and municipal employment. Does that cover everybody? With municipal, how about boards and... Well, they're not elected though.
Well, if you had an appointed board which was not compensated, that would fit within the category of municipal office, I assume, but not the other two.
But you see down below, we say other than membership on a board or commission.
Oh, no, that other than a membership in a board or commission, you can do within this period of vacating office. That's different.
Elected public office.
The vice of complicated sentences.
Or this couldn't be a council person and a planning commission person at the same time if you had a municipal office. Is that the way you'd interpret that?
But a municipal office, is that also any kind of an advisory
Yeah.
board? For instance,
How about saying no other office, either elective or appointed?
then you're excluding employment. Then you're excluding the guy who's just hired by the borough. And that's a policy.
An office is not necessarily, every employment.
Or municipal employment.
Well,
Employment is larger than office, and office is,
That's what I would say, yeah.
Do you, with that municipal employment in there, are you disenfranchising a group of, say, 1,000 people who work for the municipality?
From holding.
Do you get into any problem there?
You're not disenfranchised them, you're keeping them off the assembly.
they can vote, but they can't serve.
You want a municipal employee to be on the borough assembly?
Are you prohibiting a teacher from serving on the school board?
Yes.
You're prohibiting Cliff Hartman from being on the borough assembly, you know, as a municipal employee. Would you?
Or Joe Montgomery on the school board? Joe has enough.
Mary could
knowledge,
be
he
the
could
treasurer.
probably get elected to the school.
Mary could have been the treasurer.
Where are we?
Oh, it's,
Section 207. First sentence. I guess I don't understand what.
Are we puzzled now about what these terms mean, or about what we want to do, or about what you want to do?
Well, I think we may be puzzled about both.
Okay. I personally feel that the three categories do denote distinct statuses. If you look, none of the three categories are useless. It's only a matter of whether you want to include all three in your prohibition.
Could you explain the distinction between elective public office and municipal office?
A municipal office could be appointed, and therefore not elected. A municipal office could also be gratis, and therefore not employment.
Would this keep,
Can you give me an example of a gratis?
A gratis appointed municipal office, the city electrical commission.
what about if the city or the borough, the assembly and the school board set up a working committee of two each, an ad hoc committee, and appointed two school board and two assembly? Were we prohibiting that by this language?
no, there, the requirement would be
Elective
that,
public
I don't think that would,
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. Where
Would
you're, that's a problem. I don't know. I don't think so. You're talking about an ad hoc sort of thing, you know, just to get together and do something, or?
How about if we had the air resources tri-borough thing?
You're saying except for otherwise authorized by ordinance.
Well, I have this problem, Mr. Chairman, with this. I remember when Bill Moran was on the school board and in the legislature. Okay,
A
now,
couple, Ross.
pardon?
That's right.
Josh Wright, too. Okay, now, if this were law, that would be impossible. And I honestly felt at the time that there's really nothing wrong with that. It created a problem of attendance, but that's otherwise taken care of, I assume, here. And maybe a member, especially if the capital is moved, can deal with that. In fact, that's not something we should take that into account. That if the capital's 50 miles from town, now what's wrong with having a school board member also serve in the state senate? In fact, it might be in the community's interest to have that.
Could we prohibit somebody from holding another office?
Yes, it says, well, it says, the terms as written here would.
Would it be constitutional?
Well, that's, of course, you're adding another qualification to being a state legislator, which you probably can't do. The state
And it
constitution.
should not be a municipal
Yes.
officer. Although we're not, yeah.
That's been held in the
But it's not a qualification which is beyond the means of the person to comply with. In other words, he's given a choice.
But there are I understood that there were it might have been the Bobby Kennedy thing, that the state efforts to say you have to be a resident of your congressional district have failed because it was establishing an additional qualification for office.
I'm not sure I understand the term municipal employment. Does that encompass everybody that works for the borough, the city? So the road graveyard, your road couldn't
Serve on
be
the
elected
parks
to
board
the, couldn't be elected to the assembly
and serve both jobs.
as a road grader and the assembly?
He could not work for the new government as a road grader and serve on the assembly of the,
Because the assembly sets policy that would govern his job.
road grading job.
Well, but I don't think that that's,
And of course, it's tough to draw a line. At what level does it become so?
yeah, I just use the road grader because I just popped in my mind, it couldn't be a draftsman for the,
My own preference, and maybe we have to have something on this, is to let that be a political argument, and also covered by the conflict of interest provision that say you don't vote in your own case. But they become very difficult matters of degree here.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. That's
You know, I hate to get anecdotal, but when I served with Nick Begich, there was the argument that as a teacher, he was advocating higher salaries for teachers, and he was the beneficiary. On the other hand, though, he also, as a teacher, had more to contribute on education subjects than most of us had because he had that knowledge.
And of course, the court, under the state law, did hold that he couldn't do both.
That's right.
From my standpoint, seeing I have a vote, I'll have a speech. I don't think it should, a fellow should hold two elective offices. I don't know about the employment bit.
I think it's just basically wrong that the person that works on the garbage truck can't run for a public office in that assembly.
Mr. Chairman, would your remark extend to the state legislative situation? It would. What is the evil that's being prevented? I mean, the argument can be made that when he runs for one office or the other, that he's already too busy, or he will have a conflict. And the vote of the
Under the
judges.
present situation, there are many times that something could come up in it.
Of course, on the other hand, you wouldn't want the borough clerk to be an assembly, would you?
But basically needs the attention and the attendance of every member of that body. And if one's off in Juneau or up in Talkeetna or Fairbanks, he can't attend. He's unable to attend. Of course, if he's off in Fiji, he can't attend too.
That's the point. I mean, and then you could say that you can't work, you can't do it if you work on the slope. You can't, you're not allowed to do it.
Perhaps the other thing is that if you already serve on one elective body, you have an edge in getting elected to another elective body, which might cause the voters not to always consider the fact that you might not be around for both of them.
Question, what's the present rules on this?
In the state, well, I don't know if there are any municipal laws.
No, you can't hold any dual office under the state.
How about you and your,
So there couldn't be a legislator
you're
and
on 4-5 board. Is that,
and the
but they're not elected, they're all
teacher in the state operates
elected, they're
schools.
also all rest are just boards.
Okay.
Well, then I
In the
couldn't serve
borough,
on.
you can't be an employee and serve on the assembly, is that accurate?
No, I don't think so now, Jane. I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
Okay, what was the answer then to the question as to what determines now? Nothing?
Yeah, at the municipal level, my best understanding is that there are no constraints.
The only constraints on the state level are teachers
No. It's the case was the teacher's case. And interestingly enough, you see, in the Begich case, the court clearly said that he could not teach at Fort Richardson in the SOS system, but it left unclear whether
He could be a
Senator
teacher.
Palmer of Minilchik could teach in the Kenai Borough and serve.
Served in the legislature. So there is really no prohibition other than the case law as far as the state goes.
Well, which implemented construed a constitutional provision
The
against
state law says no legislator shall hold a position of profit under the state, or something like that, so that's the term.
dual,
isn't it, Joe?
dual position.
Oh, okay.
My personal feeling is we need some kind of prohibition in holding at least municipal employment and an elective municipal office.
What type of people are you going to have running for elective office? Your municipal elective office. You have businessmen and housewives and
Nothing wrong with that.
I can't think of a case where we've had a conflict. Can anybody think of one?
You mean the local level?
Yeah.
I mean, as two municipal offices?
No.
Municipal.
In the case of municipal employment, keeping, anybody wanting to run for elective office.
well, you have to quit before you can even run. That's true.
No, how do you have to quit? We just determined there's no law that says you have to quit.
You have had the problem raised on the Josh Wright, Bill Moran. The 207 would run afoul of the.
But that's two elective offices. What
Yeah.
what
Yeah, I was
what
talking about
Roberts is saying
municipal employment
is municipal employment and running for the assembly. Have we had that happen? Well,
But didn't
of course, is it law now? It's not law. This doesn't pass anyway.
The only thing is, it's not an elected official position other than this body, which is different from the Senate. Two borough employees checking out blood, and they were eligible to run. The charter commission would still be employed by the town, by the borough.
It was.
Whereas was it two borough employees and one city employee ran for the charter commission, and didn't have any problem doing that.
And
Consistent with-
Mrs. Froney ran for the Charter Commission and would be holding two elective offices.
Which would be prohibited by this language.
Didn't Mr. Hartman say something about the question had been raised with him there? In terms of being a municipal employee?
But you see, it was raised there, I think, as a political question, and the voters made a judgment on that, and I think that's fine. I think it's a legitimate issue raised, but I don't know if you want to keep them out of the arena.
Was there any?
Well, we have an area here where, at least among us, we're perhaps of two minds. It seems to me if we're silent, I do think we need definitely to have a conflict of interest section. This is something that is open and could always be brought before the voters at a later date. If, unless we feel so strongly we have to have something in now. And I don't.
The conflict of interest we addressed somewhere else in the charter regarding
Yeah, right. This is just tied into the
employment by a position of profit or a contract or doing business with.
That doesn't come up front.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would go for prohibiting an assemblyman from holding any other elective or appointed municipal office, so that an assemblyman could not sit on the school board, or the superintendent of schools could not sit on the school board or the assembly. If we understand the same thing, I think we have to talk about what an office is, but I'm talking about policy type positions.
Administrative.
Now, how are you going to draw the line between the superintendent and the road cleaner? as a municipal
I
employee.
think of the road cleaner more in terms
Yeah,
of,
but I mean,
of municipal employment.
Well, then, you didn't make, we don't elect the administrator of the school. So, What
I
did you
think
say?
that
all municipal too.
at the level of the, I'm trying to think this through as I say it, but at the level of the home rule municipality, you could not hold two elected positions under the same municipal authority.
Okay.
Okay, we all agree on that? I hope. Okay, then, I think that it would probably be undesirable to have, a department head, superintendent, that type of person sitting on the elective body too. That's just my view. I don't know if we're getting into a gray area here, but there I'm thinking in terms of a certain kind of weight that comes, disproportionate weight that comes into to a group of equals, because one person is full-time into the high policy of the government and the others are probably part-time people, and that bothers me a little bit.
I also see a problem with the road grader sitting on the assembly. Because I really see that he might get a lot of pressure from his superiors in the road grading section to go back to the assembly with certain things.
If you wipe out 5,000 people, it can't run forever. Or for
I guess,
You either work for them or you run them.
You protect him in other ways, though.
I guess that's the point, is the theory on that kind of prohibition probably is that if the road grader is on the assembly, he is both employer and employee.
I understand, yeah, I understand the problem, but I think it's probably an unfair situation.
I'm on the board of directors of the bank, and I'm an employee of the same bank. I may have disproportionate power within the bank, I suppose. I don't notice it.
Your penalty is you can't borrow from that bank.
What do we do if we have the council manager form of government? I mean, we're sort of assuming the assembly mayor form here, but if we have a council manager form, the road grader sitting on the assembly hires the manager who hires the man who hires the road grader. How are you going to fire the road grader if he's not performing his duties properly?
Well, I don't think that's which form of government you have. I think you still have the same problem.
It is an interesting problem.
You wind up not only with perhaps misbehaviors on the elected body, but also things happening in your day-to-day function.
I can't answer the council manager argument very well, but I do think that the theory of Hatch Act approaches has been to make it a crime for any supervisor to impose political requirements on his subordinates and protect. And I think that my own philosophy on it is that is a better approach to it than to chill the political expression by all employees. The idea was that, that to protect the employee from that kind of abuse, you prohibited him from participating in the political process. But I think the better way to protect him is to control demands, insistence on contributions, and so forth by his superiors, and let him participate voluntarily in the process. It's an age-old argument, and it's a close question.
And just to mention, is any problem with collective bargaining, for instance, where an assemblyman is a member of a union,
Yes.
a member of a collective bargaining group who may have opposing fiduciary type?
I mean, in the unit of the municipal or otherwise, would you say, for example?
Tri-trades. You got a tri-trades member sitting on the...
Well, that situation could arise that I don't want to get into personalities, but one could be a member of the firefighters union
And run for office.
and run for office and not be a municipal employee. You could be in another, you could be working on the Alyeska pipeline, be a member of the same union, and then be trying to deal with the union that,
But you wouldn't be really setting that directly responsible, setting Alyeska's wage rates. You'd be setting them for the municipality.
but we were talking about pressure, and the question is, if you're a Teamster,
Not quite as
I
direct.
was thinking of conflict of interest more than pressure. Just a built-in conflict of interest in any collective bargaining relation between the employer, the assembly, and the employee.
but again, then the question is, do we have a conflict of interest provision that requires you to disqualify yourself from action? Or is it the more subtle thing that Sherry's talking about, not the action?
I think we're bogged down. Who can get us out of our morass?
I think perhaps we ought to
Why that?
Go back to
I
there.
apologize.
No,
Very interesting business, though.
it is interesting.
Can we set this aside for a bit and think on it? And
I think
consider it tomorrow after we've slept on it?
Would you like to delegate your attorney to come up with some nice clear language?
I don't think it has any direction yet. I mean, I really don't want to send him off into the
You can't
forest.
do form without substance, Bill, there's no question about that.
Go on.
Yeah, let's move on, and tomorrow maybe we'll see the light of day.
What are you going to work on it today, Joe? Go home and work on it.
Now, the next section, we would propose that its title be municipal clerk, and that subsections A and B be deleted, and that subsection C, the designation C, be deleted, and that the rest of that subsection stand as proposed. Now, the reasoning behind this is that
Which
It-
one are you on?
section 208,
Dropping out A and B
dropping out A and B and leaving C as it
and
stands.
leaving C as it stands, right?
Yes,
Okay.
but you take the letter C off, because there isn't a
Oh,
and B.
yeah, oh, I see.
And you change it, the heading to municipal clerk.
Anybody see any problem with that?
To municipal clerk. Now, the reasoning behind this was that this is a power that they would have anyway, and that if we're silent on it, we don't give any push one way or the other to hire extra staff. They can do so if they wish. My personal fear is that at some point, if an assembly began to really get going with this, they might wind up with a huge staff, and we'd have another governmental
This
entity
fear
all
was
set up to
actually
parallel it. This was expressed by someone.
by some of a couple of the assembly people that we met with, that they liked the idea of having that, but they could see a fear in it too, and it seems like by stating it, perhaps we almost point in the way of a
We almost
policy.
encourage.
Again, this may be affected by the type of government form you choose.
Well, sure, right. As we go through this, we have to keep that in mind. Do you
No,
see any objection to not listing those two?
Well,
As a lawyer.
How about his birthday?
person,
That's
well, I don't know, as a person, if I were on the assembly in a strong mayor situation, I would want staff, and I would look for the assembly.
But you
You're
could-
not prohibiting it, I
No.
understand.
So you could have it.
Why are we doing this section now when we haven't really grappled with what form of government we're talking about?
This,
Well, because a lot of this is procedural, and regardless of which form of government we have, I mean, we have to consider something. And it was the thought that we would wait and decide on the form of government next week after we got our survey results back.
Okay, well, question of whether or not you've got staff for the assembly legislative body or not has to be dependent upon what form of government.
We are aware of that. I think we just said it, but we realized that would have to be changed if it went the other way.
This, in my mind, does not prohibit a legislative body from hiring their own staff. It just doesn't encourage them to do so. Section 209, if there aren't,
Why not say anything about a clerk at all? Wouldn't you hire one anyway?
Well, I think the difference, it clearly sets out who has the responsibility, I think, for the clerk. And if you have the separate powers, I think you definitely want to give that to the assembly.
to make sure that the clerk is answerable to the assembly.
Again, come back to the form of.
Could I ask a question in that regard? This might, while you don't want to encourage the appointment of expensive staff, the language I'm concerned with could have the opposite effect. When you say the assembly shall appoint a principal clerk and staff and prescribe the duties of that office, is there an implication that that is the extent of the appointing
Expressio
authority?
unius and so forth.
Right. What Rick's referring to is the principle that if you express one thing, you
yeah.
exclude others.
We did talk about, adding a phrase that to the charter, but not right here, that would apply to other areas such as the powers and so on, that we have not done that we are not limiting.
Well, I'm saying that if the sentence were that the assembly shall appoint a municipal clerk and staff and prescribe the duties for personnel so appointed, I wouldn't have the objection. But when you say that office, the implication is that if the assembly goes beyond appointing a clerk, it's violating the charter.
What were your wording again? Prescribe the...
Well, that was the assembly shall appoint a municipal clerk and staff and prescribe the duties. What did I say? Such personnel or
I see what you're saying. Does the assembly presently appoint the deputy clerks?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think they did make that, didn't they? Here recently with... I think they did make that decision.
Okay.
Let's see, we lost your word.
Of such person.
that way. Maybe that goes back too far.
I can see it. I'm not sure exactly.
Would you, Joe, feel more comfortable in having another sentence in there that says something about the assembly shall be free to appoint any staff as it shall require in the performance of its duties?
Well, it says that. I don't know.
Just issue.
If you do that, why not just use that sentence alone? Jay?
For the members of our public who are very concerned about a burgeoning government that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I just think that would be totally unsatisfactory.
A and B.
That the assembly can appoint whatever staff they want, because then you've got
Well,
visions of...
I think that's why we recommended that A and B.
no. I think my view would be that if it said the assembly shall appoint a municipal clerk and staff and prescribe their duties or the duties of such personnel, that means to me that if the assembly wants to, as part of the staff, get legal research or financial advice, they can go ahead and do it and fund it. But if you say that office, then you're talking about
The municipal clerk.
Yeah.
the heading, Joe, for this is municipal clerk for the section. Now, I think what I hear you saying is that the word staff does not modify municipal clerk. It's not just the staff of the municipal clerk as you're construing it, it's any staff.
Rick?
Well, that's a good point, Shay. I think the way it's written here, especially in light of the word shall, the word staff means the staff of the clerk.
Yeah.
And they're distinguishing the clerk from other employees in that the assembly is to appoint the clerk and its staff, as opposed to the executive who further on is empowered to appoint everybody else. And therefore, if we want to cover Joe's concern that the assembly be able to appoint other staff, we would want to put it in another phrase or sentence that didn't use the word shall, but used the word may, and otherwise clarify.
We're absolutely necessary, and if it can't be done without the legislative body.
Well, again, this goes to the form of government, but I really don't want to do anything to foreclose that opportunity. I think that's essential.
But have,
Why would we have to say we can when anything that we don't say we can't do?
Rick?
The charter is...
Joe, I think, excuse me, Jane. I think your concern about the implied limitation that might exist here would be more of a danger if it were may. If it said the assembly may appoint a clerk and describe the duties, maybe that would imply that you may not appoint anybody else. But mandating one does not seem to me to retract the power with respect to others.
you'll sue on
Frank had suggested that we put in a phrase, a super phrase, which says that this document does not restrict the municipality from the exercise of any powers unless it specifically states that restriction.
I think that's real dangerous. To put that right up there in front of God and everybody says you can do anything you want except what we, besides what we believe to be true. That's the implication of the document all by itself.
People might construe it that the only thing somebody can do is what's in here. And then when they come out and do something else, they...
A general provision to the effect that municipal powers as specified in this document shall not be deemed restricted by implication or something of that sort.
I like the wording better. Anyhow, that
Well,
can be
that's-
considered at a later date.
Gosh, I hate to be the one to be the problem here, but to me, it's a step backwards. It's designed, I know, to avoid the concern of people who don't want burgeoning government. In the 1971 charter, they refer to legal financial advisors and so forth. Now, the suggestion is to be silent about it, so as not to encourage unnecessary hirings, or to suggest that it's our suggestion that should be done. And I'm in agreement with that. But I just don't want to give anybody an argument on the other side that we're suggesting that the assembly needs a clerk and that's the end of it.
part of what's going to happen, I think, on some of these things is the kind of reaction we get to something, and we need to get something to them, and widely circulated, and get public reaction to find out whether we're doing it. And I think if we don't find it, we're pretty sure we're on neutral grounds, and if we don't start to get that kind of impact, then we haven't put that up in the mind. I think it's hard for us to see it and then to drop it. If it's never there, perhaps the issue will not be raised, and even if, later on if it's raised, it's fine because we do have the power.
In our lunch with the assembly, Joe, we asked them about this and whether they felt they now had the power to hire any staff, even though it wasn't set out. And they said, oh, yes, they did feel that they did.
Let me just ask
one question of Mr. Garnett on this matter. Would it be argued that since this charter commission had agreed, and I imagine that's a matter of our minutes somewhere, to use the 1971 charter as a draft charter as a markup document, and that the 1971 charter having referred to those things, and we being silent about it, that we made a conscious policy judgment to, you know what I'm saying, as a matter of
Yeah.
legislative history? Is that a risk we went?
I don't think it's the type of argument that would cut any ice in court, but as a political sort of argument, sure, that's a risk.
Well, I'll go along, but I really do so with hesitation, and I am going to mull that over because
Would it help in our commission notes to refer to the fact that in this particular section, we did not mean to imply that that was not to be a possibility?
yes, that would help. That would satisfy.
Note on the record.
Legislative history.
Except that you took all this reference out of the room. Which particular section are we
This
208A.
208 A and B.
What's next?
Okay, the next one, 209, public records.
Could I just stop you on the matter of legislative history so that it's in the notes? That as I understand it, section 208A and B are permissive in what the assembly may do and express something that it is felt the assembly can do inherently, and that C is mandatory and is therefore retained. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
As a matter of fact, when our subcommittee was meeting, the thing that we said was that A and B used the language may, whereas C used the language shall, and therefore we felt that any may provisions could be excluded. Okay, 209.
About gave you up, girl.
Sorry, 129, program and air pollution.
Public records. We recommended that subsection A be deleted because, as Mary pointed out the other day, assemblymen are considered to be people, and in subsection B it says that the public shall be able to do what subsection A says, specifically about assembly persons. So we felt it was unnecessary to make the distinction between the two.
Proper observation, Jerry, I would see one difference there, and that is, shall be public records unless otherwise provided by law. And the first section says to inspect all records of the municipality, whereas the assemblyman,
If it says all, there is a difference.
first it says all records, and in the second one it says except as provided by law.
That's a point, because possibly the
Legislative the Senate say this is not available to the public and then not be available to them. Of course, they could change that ordinance, I guess.
Rick, I was going to ask Joe, what do you think of it? Do you run into a parallel sort of thing as with executive sessions, for instance, that though meetings are open as to certain subjects, executive sessions, which is, with respect to the public, and is it reasonable to preserve the same sort of distinction as to records? Most records, but not all records, are public records. But the assembly should see all.
Somebody tell me what an example of a public record that, or a record that should be open to the public.
A confidential personnel file that relates to why somebody is terminated, for instance.
Well,
Is that,
An assemblyman might feel a legitimate need to look at that to pass on whether or not the person should be terminated. You will make that decision. But the public would not necessarily have the same interest in that file.
Yeah, there is a difference.
There really is.
Yeah.
And I don't think,
Stand corrected on
yeah, I think
that,
we,
Chairman, that had not
I had not noticed the all.
I noticed that he,
yeah, I think
Thank you for opening your eyes.
And Mary, I had not intended to put the burden entirely on you. I was being humorous in indicating that.
Well, I did feel a little bit like you had excluded.
This may not be
Mr. Josephson,
just a matter of interest. Are school records, municipal records for this purpose?
Yes. I would think so.
I would think so.
I would certainly,
You have to sign for your school records.
yeah, but that, all records in the municipality, and they're certainly a part of the municipality. Oh, you mean currently under,
I would think that provided by law, that the records of children in school, is that what you're referring to?
No.
Would be provided that they're not open for public inspection.
That's true under federal law as to
Under
student
law.
records. Now, as to teacher records, I would assume they are municipal records, and I'm not sure what constraints apply to inspecting them.
At one time, I know the individual couldn't see his own, but I think that has been opened up so the individual may see his own personnel.
Well, new federal
My mother
law,
couldn't see mine last year.
Isn't there a court
they,
right to see your records?
but there is a congressionally mandated right, I don't know about the court. In this past year, the Fed said that any school district that receives federal money must make all student records available to the student or parent and may not make them available to anybody else without written permission.
What about police? What about police records now under existing law in the city borough? Do you know how they're treated?
I think they're public records except for underage. You see
Anybody,
them published in the paper.
anybody can go in and ask about anybody else's police record?
I think so.
Can you get a rap sheet? I don't know. Can the public walk in and get the rap sheet?
I think there are probably laws covering these things.
I don't believe it becomes a public record until there's a court conviction.
We could have a,
Maybe it's this one.
we could have a new Alaska constitutional provision on privacy that someday will be implemented.
I don't see any particular danger. I would imagine that the 1971 Charter Commission looked into the fact that they weren't doing something really terrible.
But let's check on that, because I was surprised to discover that I had a police record. When we went to the Philippines, we had to get a clearance of police records, and my husband went down to assure that we didn't have a police record. And he says, "Oh, but your wife does." And he says, "That's news to me. What's it all about?" Well, I had reported a bullet hole in the side of my car that happened while I was in it, and that gave me a police record.
That's right. Isn't that amazing?
Well, but 209B, did you have any changes in that?
No, we had no changes in that whole section now, so long as you leave A in, and I think there is good reason for that. So, moving on to 10.
Did we propose to move that section 209 into a general section relating to records and so forth, or we're going to leave it in the assembly article?
I didn't have a note, and I don't recall
we
discussing
didn't
that.
discuss that.
But we might make a note when we're putting the document together that might be a reasonable thing to do.
Well, into the general provision.
Well, since we're leaving the specific reference to assemblymen's rights to inspect all records, it makes somewhat more sense than it did last night.
Let's put a question mark about whether we wish to leave it there. I think we're going to have to get the whole down and then start looking at it to make sure that we have parallel things happening. The Office of Ombudsman, our recommendation was that we provide for an ombudsman. There seems to have been a lot of public testimony and sentiment for an ombudsman, and it was on the public opinion poll, and I think there would be hue and cry if we didn't provide for it somehow. What we suggested, however, was that it say simply, there is established in the legislative branch of the municipality the Office of Ombudsman. The duties shall be prescribed by ordinance, or some such wording, general wording.
Well, some of the testimony in the public hearings was to leave it out entirely, and let the new assembly, whoever they may be, provide for it if they want to. And some of the other testimony was that just, which I think I probably tend to agree with, it's just, it merely need to be said that the office of the ombudsman may be provided for. Forget it. Say no more of that.
There may be established.
Yes, may be provided for, may be established an office of the ombudsman. It leaves the suggestion there, and that it allows them to do that. But that's all.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I disagree. I think the office should be stated in the charter, and I think that the ombudsman's independence should be preserved as it would be in the old section 210 B. There has been testimony, I think, if there hasn't been testimony, it's come to my mind, that, and I
Would have testified.
had I not been elected, I would have testified, that it's important in terms of the public understanding that there is an ombudsman and to his status, dealing with other municipal officials, that he has the protection of the charter. And the nature, the ombudsman lacks all powers to accept the power of conciliation and, if need be, public opinion. And I think he should have the kind of protection that the 71 Commission tried to give.
Do you, when you said B, do you agree with the 5-year term?
I don't care about if you want to say 3 years or some other term, or even for a fixed term, and let the Assembly decide that. That would be agreeable with me. I'm not even interested in,
The 2/3 vote, right?
well,
Oh, for cause.
By 2/3. With cause.
Wouldn't it be the same sort of things that an assemblyman would be, or a school board member would be removed, and that's what you consider cause?
well, in the first place, we don't know again whether we have a council manager system or a mayor, and that makes a lot of difference. But you could have a situation in which the ombudsman, maybe under either system, has done nothing wrong except bring to the public attention that something poor, evil has happened, and embarrass elected officials or officials who are, responsive to an embarrassed mayor, might can him for that. And and the threat of that is a serious matter. Now, you can say, well, we have to trust our elected officials, but then, of course, maybe we don't need an ombudsman at all, which is Bill's point. But I think you do need one, and I think he should have that.
I think maybe I could see more clearly if I knew the type of government that we were going to be recommending. table it or defer it until we get further along.
I have no quarrel with that. Okay, defer until, form of government
There's
decides.
something about the office bothers me, and I don't know what it is, and I can't tell you.
You read the editorial tonight.
No, I didn't even see the paper.
There's a big, long
Is there-
editorial
is
in
there-
the Times, last in
Well-
the
Yeah, well, I didn't see it. I didn't read the picture.
state ombudsman,
Good, am I lucky?
which is not why we recommended this be deleted.
Where's the paper?
So that wraps up our recommendations on this section, and I think that probably the best thing to do is to take formal action on it tomorrow or next week. And that we now move on to service areas.
Mr. Chairman, I think, Sherry, it's a matter of practical, whether you like it or not, we're going to have to do this next week. After Rick has had a chance and we can have it back in form. I don't see any way we can get this in any form for us tomorrow.
No, that's why
Rick has already said it can take over the weekend to clear up the
Yeah.
other December meeting, 2 o'clock.
Gotta go to Kodiak.
So I would
I gotta
suggest,
go to Kodiak this weekend too. We'll stay in your hotel.
Great. I'll put that in my budget. I'm just down doing it.
Okay.
No, don't change my mind.
Did you have time to do any work on the service area?
Sure did. Doesn't Mary have a copy of this thing? I put it on the table.
What's next?
Sherry has the first one. Okay, we are now, didn't I
don't
give
have
you?
She needs a new one.
One of these?
Lisa, you intrigue me. Have you made lots of notes and then you don't tell us? Are we not letting you talk? Because I know you've done a lot of thought and a lot of checking, and I'd like to have your input on some of these things.
Oh, okay.
I mean, when?
Whenever I feel like,
I mean, give input. But you do have ideas as we go along.
ideas,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But, most of the time somebody else has expressed them, and there's no need to reiterate what someone else has already said.
All right, should we go on then to section 905?
I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that Rick go over the proposed wording. And sort of explain, since he was the one who put out the words for us.
Okay, Sherry, this is tentative, I should say. But the first change I suggested was in reference to implementing this provision by ordinance. And the reason I did that is that the first sentence up there relating to prohibition we're talking about is pretty brief and general. And there may be some aspect of that first sentence which is not entirely clear when it comes down to actually working it out, the details. It's something we haven't foreseen in that one little sentence. By allowing the assembly to implement it by ordinance, we remove the suggestion that this one little sentence is the gospel, and that if there is some ambiguity, some unforeseen ambiguity or incompleteness about it, we're just stuck with it. Normally, if you have a standard, say in a constitution, and it's implemented by legislative bodies, that implementation is given considerable weight in interpreting what the standard means. And I just meant to give the Assembly that sort of leeway to make contemporaneous construction, in a sense, by enacting the actual way to implement that. Now, the other thing that I added was the clause in B after the word areas, the clause including procedures for initiating a service area by popular petition. I thought that idea had surfaced earlier, and it seemed to me useful to spell out that among the procedures, in other words, if we say the assembly by ordinance shall adopt procedures for establishing the boundaries of service areas, that's not necessarily any different from saying the assembly shall adopt the boundaries of service areas by ordinance. Unless we specify that we intend for those procedures to include something other than the normal ordinance procedure, we haven't added much. This including language would mandate that the procedures permit a group of people in an area to come in with a petition and say we want a service area in this area and we have X number of people who feel that way. Now the criteria here are definitely a flyer. What I put in response to the discussion last night were these 4 standards that I hoped would give some guidance to the Assembly in making the final decision on service area boundaries. And of course, they, I believe, are more or less self-explanatory, I hope. And there may, of course, be others, but these are the ones that occurred to me on offhand.
I think the wording of that number 2 could be improved a little if we just think about it. But there is one other thing that I think should be in this service area section, and that is how the people go about removing a service if they determine that they can't afford it after they've had it a while, or that they no longer wish it in relation to what it costs.
Like,
Any,
for instance.
yes, fire, where they're not actually receiving the service, reasonable amount of it, you know. Or say road service, if they prefer to do it on a private contract, they figure they can do it cheaper,
Well,
you know.
Your item 1 provides for the level of service, whether they can give the same level of service with it.
Item 1 does not give the chance for the people to ever change their mind. I've got a sneaking suspicion quite a few folks in Anchorage would like to no longer pay for municipal garbage service if they were given a choice. And I think there should be something written into this service area thing that provides a method for the criteria again by which they could get rid of it without having to go to a referendum.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Granite, under state law, is there any reference to the dissolution of the service area for such reasons?
Well, the reference is in that general provision that we, the subcommittee, decided not to put in. That is, that service areas may be adopted, abolished, altered, and established by ordinance. That is the only reference to abolishing or dissolving service areas I'm aware of.
Would it, without our getting into that, would it meet Mrs. Froney's objection, question to you, Mary, through the chair, really, if we provided that the Assembly by ordinance shall provide, a method for the dissolution?
Again, without the criteria, the folks that I have heard object to this, like the ones out there at Potter, they won't feel that it's a safeguard that this is giving, that is not presently exactly guaranteed.
What if you said something like, added another one on that said residents within the service area may petition for the deletion of undesirable services?
Undesirable.
Services they no longer wish.
Yeah.
Right. Just thinking of approaching it this way, Mary, if we get a set of standards that make sense in terms of applying, of setting that
It's the same ones.
That's right, the same one. In other words, if you set up as a criteria for setting it up in the first place that it meets these standards, the criteria for dissolving it would be that it no longer meets these standards. Right?
Yeah.
I wonder,
If the desires of the residents are no longer there, then that's,
In other words, the assembly could establish procedures for dissolving the service area in the event that the criteria stated above are no longer substantially complied with.
that's right. That was needed.
That's okay.
That was needed.
Well, but yeah, I don't, maybe this is not as an example, say that, I don't think I disagree with what you're saying. I say that an area for the dense sewers, and they,
Well, there are some that the debts and so forth would have to continue with the
yeah,
folks.
I mean, you just couldn't stop tomorrow and say, I don't want your water anymore, and.
No. Then I don't think all of these would probably apply if we look at these carefully. I don't think that necessarily all apply.
And of course, these things are only factors to be considered in the final decision.
Well, that's why I don't have the wisdom to say, looking down the road, how you should dissolve or amend the size of surface area boundaries. I think we can say that there has to be that opportunity, and the Assembly's got to provide it.
There must be a provision for it.
Yeah.
This is what I'm speaking about, and that probably they should consider the same criteria.
Maybe we're trying to make it too complicated.
No, I don't think we are.
You could almost say, Mary, couldn't you, in establishing or dissolving, I mean,
That's
it's one
true.
thing.
I see
You
nothing
consider
wrong
these
with that.
factors, whether you're setting one up or knocking one down.
Yes.
Well, all right, let me try that on for size.
Establishing dissolving service area boundaries is considered.
Or in establishing or dissolving service area.
Lisa?
I'm just wondering, could it end up where somebody didn't pay any taxes at all? No, any local taxes?
No.
Well,
Joe?
Frank, what I was going to, I would like to go back to the legislative language you read, because it's more than just dissolving. It might mean amending, right?
You could use that.
Okay, so you could say that the Assembly by ordinance shall adopt procedures for establishing, dissolving, and whatever the other things are.
Altering or abolishing.
Completely neutral statement, altering or abolishing the boundaries of service areas, including procedures for procedures through popular petition. Okay? And in establishing, and go through the thing again, dissolving, the Assembly shall consider at least the following factors. And then you list them. And it's a completely neutral statement. It gives no more weight to creating than to dissolving.
I think that's, personally, I think that's just exquisite.
I think we Mr. Chairman, could I,
Sherry?
as I understand what Joe said, then it would read, the Assembly by ordinance shall adopt procedures for establishing, altering, or abolishing the boundaries of service areas, including procedures by popular petition.
Or what wouldn't you say, for popular?
Including procedures through or utilizing popular petition.
Utilizing popular petition.
And then,
In establishing, altering, or abolishing service area boundaries, the Assembly shall consider the following.
And then one was liquid all.
and then, what is the meaning of item 1? Or are we still getting clarification?
Now, is that,
Yes, except that I would like to say shall consider at least the following, because
Yeah,
there are other...
yes, I think that's what we did say.
When you talk about service at the substantially the same level, we did talk, when we talked to Norm Levesque, that it is possible to utilize differential taxation within a service
I
area.
don't think that's true.
You don't think
No,
it's true?
if it's a differential level of taxation, it's a different service area.
Well, then this is a valid
The
criteria.
level of
If that's
taxation
true.
within the service area is uniform for the particular service. How's that for?
I think,
That's a political answer.
I think he's right.
Well, that's fine with me. That's contrary to
I
what we
think,
do. And I,
I think Norm was mistaken. I haven't checked with Gary, but I think Norm was mistaken.
Are there other questions about 905?
I think it's kind of a general comment that it seems to me, you know, we are bringing in more detail than is needed. And is it because we don't trust the legislative body to provide for all of these things or exercise the wisdom?
It is. Yes, ma'am.
In most areas, they're smart enough, but when we get to service areas, they're not smart enough.
In the planning commission, we said, you know, we trust the assembly to adopt these,
A comprehensive plan, but we didn't tell them how to do it.
And the planning, how
But
the
it's
planning
dangerous.
commission would operate.
Well,
Somebody said it was dangerous too? What? Joe?
if you give weight to the public hearings that have been held, it's fair to infer that service areas may be the most sensitive issue that we face. We haven't tied the Assembly's hand at all. We've only given them certain criteria that they have to take into account.
Didn't you indicate yesterday that they would say, whereas it has been found that, whereas it's been found that, establishing or dissolving?
In other words, that gives you your heading for your ordinance.
I think that's what would happen in effect. I still have some problem going down in parenthesis 2
It isn't quite right yet.
to the matter of tracing the vote.
That's not worded quite right. And I think since we're talking about altering or abolishing as well as establishing, that the wording of 3 is not quite proper English. Since we might be speaking to the other, and at that point, if the economics both to those left in as well as those that wish out. So maybe that could be reworded so it would go either direction.
Boy, that would confuse me. This 2. I know what you're trying to do, but are you trying to write in here, or have us write in here, Mary, that there's a method to gerrymander out whenever people would want to? We're talking about establishing or getting rid of, but does it tell us what happens after a vote is taken and then we come in and read that
All right.
vote?
The vote on such things as fire districts or road improvement districts should be attached to the land from which the vote came, the same as the vote for a sewer lateral. In which case, it would be impossible for the assembly or the people in the area to badly gerrymander the district. I would visualize that in such provisions that the assembly would set up, that they would have, say, some non-political body like the planning commission to look at it and determine from where the vote showed up on the map as to what was a reasonable district.
In other words, are we saying that we're changing the normal procedure, which is to set up, we set up an improvement district and we vote and it either passes or fails. Are we setting a new procedure and saying that based on the vote something else happens, that the vote is not absolute? That's, you know,
That's right.
that's what she's saying.
I'm saying now you can't gerrymander the boundaries, brothers and sisters.
Well, it really, I think, would cause, seems to me, a great deal of difficulty. Let's take an example that we're taking a large area here, and that's a service area. all this area in here,
For what? Oh, for an improvement district. For what type of improvement? Because this
well,
has effect.
we're talking about, what are we talking about here? We're talking about service area, that we're gonna make a service area here. I don't know, it could be anything. And as a basis of the vote, one of the things, you know, we're gonna set it up by ordinance, it's going out to vote. Somehow this implies that that vote doesn't accomplish but one step of some kind of a procedure, then something else is going to happen. Am I misreading that too?
If establishing service area boundaries,
Uh-huh.
this is going to be considered.
Rick had a, well,
I think there's a lot, I don't know if I understand all the detail that Arliss understands, but I think there's a logical problem because the assembly has to take some leadership in setting out boundaries.
That was my
Right.
understanding, right.
Now, if you're going to relate the boundaries to the tracing of the vote for the service,
It's a tentative
how
boundary.
do you make that determination before the election?
You don't. The assembly sets the tentative boundaries.
We don't say tentative though.
Not now. Not now, the assembly doesn't. But if they set the tentative boundaries, you see, and then they identify it to the land of where the vote says yes, this automatically gives them a procedure whereby they can right then bring it back into size.
But now, what in Arliss's example,
Just take whatever.
if all around the boundaries here that you trace the vote and it says yes, and the guy in the middle says no, what do you do then?
If it's a viably large spot in the middle that doesn't affect the others, they say we're going to consider where the vote comes from. We're going to consider the cost in relation to what's done. And if it's a viably large spot that is not going to interfere with those around, there's no reason why he couldn't be out in the middle. If it's a viably large spot.
But we don't,
We said we're going to consider it. We didn't say we were going to let anybody out if it didn't seem
I'm
fine.
only trying to get a procedure. Now, the procedure I thought was either by petition to the assembly or by the assembly initiation.
I have one more problem. So, in this respect, and I think Mary raised this the other day, is there a loss of privacy of the ballot? And is that not as much a problem? If so, wouldn't that be as much a problem, even if you're not voting for a candidate? I mean, the sanctity is the same whether you're voting for a candidate or a proposition, I would
Not to me.
Greg, there's a couple of things I might try to clarify just in terms of what we were trying to do here. As for the privacy of the ballot, Frank and I were talking about this, I guess, on the way back. And obviously, you'd have to work out something to ensure the privacy of the ballot. One possibility would be, for instance, a tear-off on your ballot, where a person who wanted to have his vote geographically identified would write his vote, yes or no, on the service, and his name and address, and put it in another box. And this would be your method for making this tally. Now, there may be other possibilities. Arliss's question about the procedure may be clear, I don't know, but I think the way I thought it might work is more or less what Mary said. The Assembly has the final say-so on setting up the bound service areas. It proposes a service area, the vote occurs, and this identification is made to the extent people want it to be made by following procedure. Then, based on the way that looks on the map, the Assembly can look at it again and redraw everything if necessary. Jay?
As I understood the conversation yesterday, we were talking about services that were only tied to land. We're not talking about police protection, we're not talking about fire protection, we're talking about...
We are talking about fire protection because it's stuff on the land that burns.
Right. We're talking about people services, we're talking about things related to property.
That's right.
And that is mentioned in section 2 the way it's written right now. But
the question about the way it's written now, they should consider it. Doesn't say they have to do anything. The other point is that that those terms practically viable or something significantly viable. If somebody in the middle of the town decides they don't want fire protection, it's really going to be a trick to pull that one off. But I don't think such a situation in the middle of town is impossible. I know what Mary's concern is that some people are worried fire districts aren't getting fire service and didn't want to vote for it on the fringe of it. But again, the point of the way it's written now is it might appease some people, and the assembly is not mandated to do anything other than consider it.
Bill?
Well, it kind of comes back to spot zoning. Any planning commission is not supposed to spot zoning. That's one of the criteria that you use to work. And in a service area, you're never going to make everybody happy that what the majority wanted. And I understand what you want, but I don't know how you're going to get it.
This would come a lot nearer than
I
what we
wonder
have now.
I wonder why maybe there should be more emphasis put on it if the service is voted on, that the service be given, and maybe that's a problem with this assembly.
Sherry?
One of the things the new assembly shall do is, by ordinance, shall adopt procedures for drawing service area boundaries which provide A, B, and C, which would govern immediately but would not necessarily, I see a stylistic thing. We've tried to make a bare bones charter, and we've tried to put faith in the legislative body. I see kind of a problem if we begin changing, just in spot instances in the charter, in the main body of the document. Is there some way we could do it in the transition section instead?
Could we do it in the transition section and ensure that we got this sort of an ordinance on the books?
Mary, I haven't given it a lot of thought. Offhand, you can put anything anywhere you want to. It doesn't seem to me like the type of thing that's normally in a transition provision.
I don't think so.
Because it doesn't have any sort of fixed lifespan. It's not the type of thing intended to govern, say, the first of a particular thing and not thereafter.
I think that I can answer Joe's question, or whoever it was over here, that whether it was something that was being heard by knowing where the vote, yes or no, came from. We do it right now, but only in relation to sewers, and only in relation to laterals. We do not do it in relation to trunks.
That's an opposition. Jane?
Well, I just want to go back to Bill's point about once you say that somebody's in a service area and they're paying for the service, it's the only way you can guarantee that they get it.
There is not.
And that's the tact he's taking, which makes a lot more sense than saying you vote for it, you pay for it, and too bad you aren't getting it so you can vote yourself out. And I don't know how you legislate implementation of law.
May I bring up one, and I'm really having a problem. Let's draw, for purposes of whatever we do, a service area. That's the large square. And we're saying here, by ordinance, we'll adopt procedures for establishing, altering, abolishing service areas. So the assembly draws this up. Now, when they draw that up, it seems to me they need to take certain criteria into effect in order to draw that up. Okay, so whether it can be provided at substantially the same level of desire of the residents of the area for service. Now, I think that, and the ability to pay for it if they want, and the effect of the service, okay, on existing service areas. So they set that up. But we seem to be introducing here another element. So we have both, and okay, we found out that people are not interested in these areas in having it. Okay, then how are we going to go ahead and allow the assembly, after the vote of the people, to delete those and then find that people in the whole area looked at, say, the tax ability of that area to provide the service, and suddenly the assembly is able to delete 2 subdivisions or 4 streets or something else. And in essence, what I think we've really said is we have got to provide for 2 elections. We then have got to go back with a map that looks like this and say, Mr. Voter, do you want to? Because we've taken out...
This is all it really wants. We come back now and we say, this is the area that really thinks they want it.
Mr. Chairman,
With these that want it, this is what it would cost you.
I agree with everything Artis has said, except that it would be a continuous process of elections, because then you would go back and have your
All
second
right.
election, and some
And
people
then
would opt
somebody
out
on
of that,
another basis
and then you
would-
might have to keep going with the price tag change.
That's the reason we said the assembly shall set up the procedure.
Mary,
No, he hasn't answered it yet.
Mary, wouldn't that be taken care of basically by the statement, the desires of the residents of the area for the service?
No, because you've got to attach it to the land, or you do not know what the desires are of the residents in the area for the service. It has been proved to me in that fire district, and you cannot prove to me that it doesn't need to be attached to the land if it is going to show you what the real feeling in the area is.
Well, Mary,
Now, you could have a map just like you showed me.
okay.
You could have a map just like you showed me. In fact, there's several proposals for this sort of thing over in the Muldoon area right now. Because, in fact, they are not really getting road improvement or road maintenance, either one. They got much better service when they did it for themselves.
Well, no, I'm talking about the larger
All right,
boys.
all right. And what now? I'm talking about road for this.
Just so everybody knows, early in the evening, we agreed that at 10 o'clock we would adjourn, or very shortly thereafter. We don't want to continue this until 11.
That we would aim for, that we would shoot for 10 o'clock, having reached 10
That no meeting
o'clock.
would begin after 10 o'clock.
The motion would always be
All right. Over there in the middle of Muldoon, we've got a couple of streets that are like this. All right. In fact, there's nothing that would cause the cost to the rest of the residents, because the streets around them are maintained. It's just the inner streets. It's not the side streets that want out. It's the inner streets in here that want out. And there's nothing that would cause additional cost to the surrounding area if they were out.
But don't these people benefit by something that's happened in this area?
If they want out of part of the district, they are benefiting from the main streets that are maintained in the area. Then this would naturally, if they want to come in and get out of the snow removal, which they're not getting, and do it for themselves, they are benefiting where these streets are upgraded and maintained, where they are. And I would think that would then put them into a lesser service area.
And they're gonna pay
And
less taxes.
they'll pay less
This
taxes.
little square than if you live in another square.
That's right.
I don't agree with that. I think you can spot zone. I just don't think you can spot
Like
zone.
my neighborhood, there's the borough here, there's the city here, there's the city here. You got the grader that comes along, the grader does the city part, he stops right there, On the other side, the grader comes along, he does the city part and he stops right there. And then the grader from the borough has to come along and he does this mile stretch, And so you got this grader running around on this one portion of road where there's city all around, and you're just going to have the same thing where you're going to be having bloop, bloop, bloop.
That's the reason you have to look at it, to see whether it's viable for the rest.
Are you, how, Mary, please, because it's terribly important, and I know it's terribly important to you, but how would you respond if you were on the assembly body to a situation like this? And you're obviously going to find subdivisions that will stay out. Then is it fair to all of those who voted under certain circumstances to have a legislative body make a decision for them? Or would we, as Joe said, continually have to go back with the new set of circumstances to the voters? We wish to be fair to your people, but how about all of the other people? And we're not being fair, are we?
I think you are.
Well, I would be very annoyed if I had voted for a service, thinking because the mayor came around to my door and said that based on this service area, my taxes would be, 2 mills, only to find out that because people I didn't know 6 blocks up the road had opted out, my tax was going to be 5 mills. And that would just make me furious.
I don't think you can receive it until you've got the vote on the land and can predict the tax, and then the vote says whether or not you want it.
But then the assembly has to come back to me, which is the point that Mr. Zalisky made, and said, Joe, we're sorry, but we projected 2 mills, and now it's 5. You still want it. Then I go to the polls again, and maybe the fellow next door to me then has a change of heart, and then we're all in this.
What is it that Mary Coffey said today, a cost for each election?
I'm not talking about special elections. I don't think that the service areas that have laterals, they never go to an election for those, except for the,
Well, would it be possible to say something to if the order of
bond.
a petition, which shall consider that where a petition is offered, or prior to an election, a petition shall be circulated, which shall indicate area and address.
Of those 4.
And the area to be considered will have to have a 60%. I'm not saying it right, but a 60% majority before it can be
Initiated.
initiated.
That would be protection.
Then a petition. Of course, that eliminates an ordinance establishing or extending.
That would protect it. But this fire district was initiated by the assembly. It was there was not a single petition in the area requesting fire service.
Is there any substantive way?
None in the area at all.
Not a single one that requested fire service by petition in the area that they put out to vote for it.
How did you get it?
And it voted. It voted in. But not the periphery from all the noise I've been hearing.
It's the same really kind of thing, Bill and Mary, I'm sure from a planning point of view, in certain areas would agree, but not fire, that when you set up a zoning district, with time and time again, they'll come in with a narrow one, a spot zone, or one with boundaries that aren't logical boundaries, and you don't consider those when you look at, say, planning, development of land. But you're saying in a special thing here that, in essence, Mary, you could gerrymander, you could have hold, you could create a situation, in effect, such as the city of Anchorage boundaries to the east. So does the potential evil outweigh the good?
All right, now let's leave it for night and think about it.
Well, I have one suggestion that I'd like you to sleep on, maybe. Whether I would like to strike the second sentence in number 2, but provide that, keep the reference to the desires of the residents of the proposed service area for the service, and then say that the assembly, perhaps something like this, that to aid in determining such desire, the assembly shall adopt procedures for ascertaining the wishes of the voters, including a public hearing within the
That won't do
service
it.
area.
That won't do it unless you can attach the wish for the service to the land in some manner. The assembly has no reasonable criteria on which to make the
Why can't
boundaries.
they mail out to each land?
Yeah,
over
I
in
thought
that
about
area?
that too.
Mail out to each land over in that area like they do in the city, come on March 10th.
Thank you.
Wouldn't that be,
I wasn't there at 7:30, but I've been there since, and I found a copy on the desk.
well, I just,
Got it.
I don't know, I think that's reasonable to sort of direct the assembly to do more than hold the usual stuffy business down at Tudor Road, but to go out to the people.
And you know, we've had a great push for community councils and other things, but I'll be frank, I can see a tremendous, again, kind of philosophically now, kickback from this type of a thing. I think, Mary, that you'll have to admit that this is really, in a sense, if we would follow through to the element here, in a sense, special legislation for a particular part of the community. I can then see the possible backlash of, say, certain city residents who feel strongly, and God love them, there are those, of their utility that wish to protect in other areas. And I can see it violates what we've been consistently saying on really the very form of our document. And I think it just opens us to increase pressure to accommodate other special things. And you know, I see your concerns, and that's why I would agree with types of things and in getting the opinion, but I can't see...
Well, if we circulated a map covering the area, with lot lines on it, and allowed the person to say yes and fill in with his name and signature and identify his piece of land, this would get the purpose to the assembly before they made the boundaries, and it would accomplish my purpose.
At your public hearing,
The public hearing, you don't guarantee everybody
I was
can
going
come
to
to
say,
a
at
public
your
hearing.
public hearing that Joe is proposing in the area, such forms could be made available to people to their location and
But
their attitude towards
it
the
must
service.
be beyond just doing it at a public hearing, because too few show up at a public
I
hearing.
have no
to get a
problem, and I don't think,
I have no problem.
I have no problem with any device that is really going to get the community pulse in the proposed service area. I really think it probably would be educational for the assembly to go out there and see the area and be out there among the people. And if you want to write in something about a mailing to known voters or residents in the area or something, that's okay. But I think we've got to avoid a cumbersome process that creates pockets of...
I agree with you completely, George. When you do it with the planning and zoning or zoning change, you circulate a notice of protest or a notice to everybody, even within three 5 blocks of the area. And
I see no reason why we shouldn't
Okay, but
give notice and make sure that it's identified to the land.
Well, I'm just asking, following Joe's idea a little more than, would it be satisfactory to say that the assembly, in determining the desire of the residents for the service, shall adopt procedures including a hearing in the area and including a mail-out with the form sufficient to enable the person to indicate his residence and his desire for the service or not. You know, including at least those two procedures among the procedures.
Yes, yes.
I wouldn't mind seeing wording on that, but we still, of course, then, under this procedure, are reserving to the legislative body the ability to set the,
The final procedure.
well, no, we're leaving it to him, to the assembly, in the final analysis, after he's considered all these, to set his boundaries, then to go through the normal election procedure.
Yes.
And if a majority within that boundary say yes, then it passes.
But-
Okay,
Then they've got some reasonable criteria on which to set it, rather than their seat of their pants.
You know, I think you're always,
compromise.
yeah, I think you're always gonna have this problem till the end of time, too, because you can remember back in the city of Anchorage, when the city used to pay half the street to be paid, and you had to pay half. But the city couldn't afford it, so that no streets were paved. So then when I was on the planning commission, they passed a law that, and the council backed it up, that said that if you want your street paved, you gotta pay 100% of it. So all the streets got paved. Then, in our little area, your little area, you get your street paved. Then the next area comes along beyond it, and then they drive over here to pave streets. So they said, well, you know, you're driving on my street. And you're always gonna have that problem, and I use that as an example, but it fires out so on and so forth. It's just going to keep on going and going and going until sometime, I guess the only hope is that you get another population
But then they
that's
want
going
it.
to
And
afford
there's
it and
enough,
pay for it, you know?
there's enough that can afford it and are willing to do it.
Well, I think we have a compromise on that sounds reasonable. Rick hasn't got it all prepared yet, but
I would like to postpone re-election on this until next time, and I have some other wording that I requested from the Urban Observatory in relation to these things, and part of it I think should go in the taxation area rather than under service areas, because it's speaking to things that should be looked at in relation to paying for them. And I'd like to pass them around and let you look at them between now and the time that we come back and look at this again. Pass it.
is it the sense of a body now that you want to delay section 905 until a later meeting, or?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's appropriate, so that when we do act, we will have very specific wording, and just one additional word of caution that I feel and hope can be considered in this, that we still have a basic criteria, I think, to develop a charter that can live for many years, and we have found as we've gone through as a charter production committee, and I'm sure that the former charter commissions did, that what you think submits the idea might well not be the same. What was the incident? We came up with a good one the other night, that it's just, I guess in the planning section, we were being specific, talking about the zoning ordinance. Well, when we met with Mr. Beatty, and yet maybe we won't use zoning as a control in years to come. And I have some hesitancy in considering, meeting Mary's responsibility here, say of possibly a mail out, as to whether there might not be other appropriate ways. I hope it can be worded.
Maybe the males will cease to function.
Yeah.
Oh, it's right, that'll be a different way.
That it's not
You may
so
communicate a different way.
Mr. Chairman, I call your attention to the motion I made at the beginning.
Time is now 10:17, and we seem to have covered this area. No new unit starting now. Sherry, do you have anything to move for tomorrow? What is tomorrow like?
Tomorrow we have a noon meeting, and on the agenda, you will notice we will consider preamble, Article 1, and Article 5 on elections.
Mr. Chairman,
Carlos?
could Eddie do some calling? I surely hope we'll have an adequate number of people where it's going to be.
Debbie?
The only two that are missing, one's out of town and the other one had a prior meeting.
Shouldn't have a... But
I'll be happy to call, but.
Well, how about the people here, how many,
Are you needing, people to meet?
Well, let's see, how many are we?
You had everybody but Dick Fisher and Jim Parsons.
Fred Chai's out of town too.
Oh,
And Fred Chai will be back sometime tomorrow, but whether he'll be in time for our meeting, I don't know.
I'll be out of town tomorrow and Saturday.
are there any persons here to be heard not on the agenda? Or,
I just make a couple of comments. I have a question, and not necessarily will necessarily be answered tonight, but why are the school board members elected at large? That's a question on mine. Has it been discussed by history? Second of all, the ombudsman, there's a comment made or in the proposed charter that he be appointed and possibly removed by two-thirds vote of the members. Mr. Joseph said that the ombudsman is very important to have in there since he may dig up something that would be in opposition to the mayor or some of the assemblymen. Why not elect him? He would be much freer in his actions if he knew that he was elected by popular choice than if he knew he was removable by two-thirds of those he's going to bring up the dirt about him. And regarding services, I think that the individual, considering rational criteria, should have a sacred position there. He may establish himself a lifestyle uninhibiting upon anyone else and needing no particular services. There should be some rational criterion to protect this person's lifestyle. Granted, downtown in Central Business District, you can't deny fire protection as marriage must. And one little comment about another thing Mr. Jones said, that if he had, I'm thinking on you, if he had a possibility of getting service for 2 mills and then someone opted out of the street for 5, opted out and they went to 5 mills, that would disturb him. It shouldn't disturb him because no one has an inherent right to require someone else to pay for service for him. And it eventually may come to a point, considering this, whereby private enterprise can come in and do the job cheaper than anyone else, you know. And I think we should keep the charter options open to private enterprise coming for a service wherever it might be.
Are there any commissioner comments?
Yes, well, to that, I wasn't speaking to the desirability of municipal services versus private enterprise.
I know that. But
I just, you know, I think you feel the way I do, that I don't think voters appreciate getting slickered, and you know, and that's happened. And I think the ground rules on any proposition have to be clear when it's time to vote. That's what I was speaking to.
I think so too, Joe. I don't disagree with you on that one at all. Not a bit.
But I appreciate your comment, and the one about the ombudsman is very interesting.
One time right after the other either.
Are there any other commissioner comments regarding George's comments?
I'm very unhappy to see that our chairman is suffering,
Thank you.
but so cheerfully and with such a nice smile.
Had to have a quorum somewhere. I just hope I don't give it to anybody.
Well, I hope not.
We haven't got time to take
Are you
that.
praying, Rick?
Are there any other comments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And I want to thank our visitors for being here